Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the haunted riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. I'm here live from Ottawa following the second full meeting of Conservative MPs. It's been 37 days since the election and Liberal MPs have yet to even meet. Remember, at the first meeting of members, they have to decide if they will give themselves the power to remove the leader. Is Trudeau afraid to meet with his MPs? Or was the plan to hand out cabinet posts before letting them vote on Trudeau's leadership? We'll have to wait and see. But speaking of the cabinet, let's take a look at the old government with a few missing. Trudeau's largely recycled cabinet marks an even more radical shift to the left. Appointing Steven Guilbeault, Environment Minister, is chilling, and not just because you won't be able to afford to heat your home. Guilbeault's draconian reign as Heritage Minister revealed him to be a dangerous extremist with an authoritarian streak. Remember the internet censorship bill? Naming Guilbeault as Environment Minister right before the upcoming UN Climate Summit sends a clear signal that Canada's policy is going to be swept up into a polar vortex. We got a preview of where the weather extremists want to take us. In the Hill Times, a radical environmentalist laid out his expectation for government. He wrote, quote, "In Canada, we'd have to agree that climate is an existential emergency and that mitigation requires an urgent, regulated wind down of all fossil fuel production. We'd need to have an emergency coalition government to even consider this heretical action. This is the only path to climate safety still possible, but emergency government action isn't being debated in Parliament by policymakers or in the mainstream media." End of quote. There's a lot to unpack in that quote. As regular viewers of this show know, just before the last election, I warned Canadians that those pushing for climate emergency declarations would start to demand emergency actions. We've all had 18 months of seeing what emergency actions look like. They look like massive spending. They look like your mobility rights are restricted. They look like layoffs and ostracism for not joining the bandwagon. Historians will debate the extent of the pandemic emergency and our response, but when your hospitals are reaching capacity, it's fair to describe it as an emergency. Climate change is not an emergency. If your central policy to stop climate change is achieving net zero emissions over the next 29 years, then it's not an emergency. When a river rises 3 feet in a few hours, that is an emergency. But when it takes 3 decades, it's still an issue if you live along the river, but it's not an emergency. Despite these long timelines, the left wants to brand it an emergency. That's because the left want to do more than reduce emissions. Remember at the start of the pandemic, the Liberals kept calling it an opportunity to move ahead with their big government agenda. The radical left want to reshape society into a socialist utopia. The corporate left want to reap huge profits at the expense of everyday Canadians. For the corporate left, declaring a climate emergency is just virtue signaling. It's an empty gesture to help with fundraising. The problem is the radical left didn't get the memo. As the author I quoted earlier said, he believes that if we do not shut down the natural resource sector immediately, it will end human life on this planet. When political leaders like Justin Trudeau go around screaming that the sky is falling and climate is an emergency, 2 things will happen. Some will notice the sky is not actually falling and discount warnings about real emergencies. Others will believe the lies and demand action to prevent the sky from falling. As their fear of the falling sky grows, so too will their demands. Those demands will become increasingly more radical. And that's how you go from carbon pricing to personal carbon rations. That's how you go from climate emergency to climate lockdowns. Remember, 4 months ago, the Liberals said no one should be forced to take the vaccine. 2 months later, they switched to saying people should be fired for refusing to take the vaccine. Now they're saying these newly unemployed people should be denied their employment insurance benefits. That's what fear does. Now we're raising an entire generation who believe the world will end if the average global temperature increases by 2 degrees instead of 1.5 degrees. When I first warned about the calls from the far left for climate lockdowns, the liberal media accused me of spreading conspiracy theories and expressing climate skeptical views. They even fabricated a fake news story about a picture of Justin Trudeau tugging on a red lanyard, saying it was dangerous. Few people believe the fake news story, but the climate lockdown question was featured in the debates. The frame the media put on it is that it was a conspiracy theory and climate denialism. That's their playbook. The far left will dismiss claims they want greater restrictions on personal liberty as crazy, right up to the point they introduce the restrictions. At that point, they'll switch to calling you a climate change denier. Sorry, I forgot the left dropped the change part. Now they just call us climate deniers. The problem is, no one denies that climate changes. That's why they've adopted a new label to place on people. They're now calling anyone not on board with more radical actions climate delayers. You see, for the radical left, it doesn't matter if you think climate change is real. It doesn't matter if you support carbon taxes. If you do not get on board with whatever they propose next, you'll be branded a climate delayer. How long do you think it will take before the radical left start to cancel people for not supporting climate lockdowns? Let me know in the comments below. Well, that's all the carbon ration I have for today. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant.